Hello and welcome to ET Edge Insights exclusive interview series. Today we have with us Ms. Aparna Rao. She is the country head of Cargill Business Services. Aparna, thank you very much for speaking to ET Edge Insights. It's a pleasure to host you.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me on this.
Right. Let me begin by asking you about GCCs. Of course, India has become a hotbed for GCCs. If you see, currently there are around 1600 GCCs in the country, and EY predicts by 2030 it could be around 2400. So there is a massive scope for hiring. A large workforce could be in place. So what do you think are the opportunities as well as challenges for the HR sector on this scenario?
No, great question, and you're absolutely right. If there's any time for us to be in GCCs in India, this is the time, right? And today with 1,600 GCCs, there are a couple of challenges that or opportunities that HR focuses on, right? One is, how do you develop your internally grown talent?
Right.
How do you get the right external talent, the right person for the right role? More and more global roles are happening out of India, so how do we prepare our workforce for that? And of course, everyone wants diverse talent. Now the challenges when we move to 2030 with 2,400 GCCs from 1,600 today are more or less the same, but just the scale of growth and complexity will amplify these challenges a lot more. And it brings its own nuances. And what do I mean by that? Attracting the right talent will still be number one priority. How can HR actually widen the sources, use the right tools, to get the number and the scale that we want? And GCCs are moving away from the traditional roles. There is more and more focus on specialized roles, which again will increase the challenges there. But more importantly, why should anyone join one GCC out of the other 2,399? So what is the USP? I think a challenge for HR will be to create that differentiated strategy, the branding to attract the right talent as well. And diversity of talent, of course, as you hire people with different backgrounds, different cultures, how can the work environment, the culture be innovative and really welcoming of that talent? But also the kind of talent that we want is no longer just domain knowledge. We want people who, in addition to that, also have competencies in process, in technology, in data, and have a continuous improvement mindset with a customer-centric approach and the ability to work in a global environment. So I think the requirements from talent also is really, really increasing, and how do you get the internal talent up to that scale is important. And once you have attracted, once you have onboarded that talent, how do we engage them and how do we retain them? It's going to be a huge challenge because the competition is fierce and everybody wants the same talent pool, right? So I think, yeah, these are some of the challenges. And opportunity also is for the traditional services like finance, HR, IT, India is already the hub. The opportunity also is in the newer emerging technologies like, say, AI, ML. I was reading somewhere that globally there's a skill gap of almost 35% in the demand and supply. And according to some of the NASSCOM studies, India has one of the largest AI ML workforce and also the highest number one in AI penetration. So that's a huge opportunity to really scale and become the innovation hub in the emerging technologies.
Interestingly, Aparna, you just talked about the skill gap. So skilling is a vital thing in this entire operations of GCCs. So is there a set strategy HR keeps, or it varies from industry to industry to ensure that skilling happens right from onboarding to the person's upgradation at the job? So how does this work?
See, skills depends on a lot of things, and the future of skills will depend on how the technologies advance, what is the evolution of the nature of work, what are the business needs. I think these three determine mainly what are the skills required. Of course, the skills could vary depending on the journey the GCC is in, the maturity there, or the complexity, or even what function it mainly focuses on. But on a general approach,
Right.
taking a step back, I think for the future, digital skills are going to be very, very important. Um, People who can leverage and attract or adapt to the emerging technologies will be extremely important. And I spoke about AI, ML, cloud computing, automation. And today we focus so much on data driven decision making, right? So, people with experience in data analytics, data visualization, governance, and privacy will be extremely important. Apart from these technical skills, I think today, for example, generative AI does a lot of, or technology does a lot of work that was not done previously. Today, Gen AI can make predictions, it recognizes the patterns and makes predictions, but also it generates content, which was not the case before.
Right.
So if technology is doing so much of our work, what will we do in the future, right?
It's a very pertinent point.
And there, I think the need for people who can step back and really think critically, look at cross-functionally a problem and solve that with adaptability, with agility and resilience, who can work in a VUCA environment globally, in diverse environments, and innovate, but also be empathetic will be extremely important.
Right, right.
And these are traits that I think is something we'll have to start thinking about how we want to cultivate them.
Right.
Because irrespective of what the skill sets and irrespective of how the evolution of job requirements or skill sets are, we'll always need leadership, the right
Absolutely.
leadership to engage, to
Right.
inspire people. Because today there's a lot of buzz about data-driven decision making, which is fantastic, but who's going to look at the people behind that, the emotional aspect?
Right.
So I think emotional quotient will also be extremely important. So the future will be people who can collaborate, who can adapt,
Right.
and also who have the learning agility.
Right.
I think it's going to be crucial for our organizations, for our HR teams to start building strategies on how do you bring that, whether you're a fresher, whether you're with many years of experience, these are aspects I think we'll have to start building
Right.
in our
Right.
in our development plans right from the beginning, and expose people to a variety of problems, functions, etc.
Right, right. I think one of the bigger challenges which probably HR face more so in a global landscape is language and culture. So when you have a global team, obviously cultures differ, there is a language barrier. So how does HR ensure that everyone is on the same page?
There are a lot of funny instances that happens, right? I'm sure we are all faced some or the other sort of miscommunication or
Right.
misinterpretation, sort of a misunderstanding sort of situation when you're talking to people globally. And there are various reasons for that. One is it could be language proficiency differs, or the cultures are different. Some cultures are more direct, some are indirect.
Right.
Some require you to read between the lines, some are sarcastic, there's dry
Right.
humor, for example. And of course, the cultural norms can be very, very different. Now, how can GCCs or organizations work toward this? I know a lot of GCCs focus on communication training, focus on language training as well. It could be English, it could be other languages as well, depending on the countries you interact with. I loved this exercise. I think I was exposed to it more than a decade ago. Is a culture map,
Right.
where you map your culture and of course you, because you could be different
Again,
from
a
the
different character,
stereotypical.
yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Right.
And then the cultures that you interact with,
Right.
mainly like German or American, and then you see that where there could be potential
Right.
points of conflict or friction. That helps a lot. So a culture training, I think, is something that organizations can invest in. Using the right technology, like subtitles. I know this sounds very basic, but even recording meetings or working on virtual platforms like Mural and things like that, where it's in writing, sometimes help.
Right.
But I think just having the open environment where you can say, hey, I didn't get that, or, I don't think you meant this, or did you really mean this, and have that open conversation,
Right.
I think is important. See, today people, I think all over the world have some basic needs, and I think they deserve some basic etiquette, like openness, transparency.
Right.
So it's okay to over communicate when you're working with people virtually. It's okay
Right.
to clarify, and it's important to respect boundaries also, because there are different time zones, and you'll notice a lot of time the Asian time zones, for
It's
example.
very important point.
Yeah,
Right.
all the meetings are in the evening, so I think it's important to be respectful, mindful,
Right.
and the more we do that as companies, then I think our colleagues also appreciate and understand that.
Right.
With India being looked upon to be the future global leader in GCCs, I think this will be a very important part to get right and invest in some of these.
Right, right. It's a very pertinent point, Aparna. Now, Cargill has been involved in a lot of CSR activities, and obviously sustainability is another area where every organization is consciously looking at. So when we talk about GCCs, is there a set do's for sustainability? And with regards to Cargill, if you can talk about some CSR activities.
Sure, I can. I don't know if there's a set path, but I can say there are three big areas that GCCs can play a role.
Right.
And the first one is, see, in most cases, GCCs are the largest operations in the company.
Right.
So it's important that we align with the parent company's CSR strategy and goals, and then get our colleagues to be aware and trained and participate in some of these. It could be whether energy efficient technology or initiatives. It can be recycling. It can be sustainable sourcing, and also work with our partners and suppliers. Right. Have some very clear goals and communicate that more often. So that's the first piece for our own operations. Use solar and things like that. The second piece is, I think, a pretty well-known one, which is the 2% profits over the average of last 3 years, right? The CSR programs. And some of the things we are doing with Cargill is we are working with Akshay Patra. I think we've impacted 3.2 million lives already through the midday meals. We are also sponsoring vehicles for the transportation of the food and solar panels as well for the cooking. We sponsor education, data science from IIT Madras for people from underprivileged backgrounds, or even girls for STEM. Rainwater harvesting is something that we started doing this year. So these are some of the things we're doing, but another part is to engage our huge team, because it's a large team. A couple of years ago, the team won the Limca Book of Records for making, I think, 27,000 paper bags in 40 minutes.
Wow.
And next week, we're actually aiming to get into the India and Asia Book of Records by painting 1,000+ blackboards before the school starts in June.
Nice.
Across 120 government schools. So around 30,000 children will come to a clean school with a clean, freshly painted blackboard. So that's a way you engage and get the collective power of our workforce, right? So that's the second piece, because yes, the money part of it will of course be spent as per the law, but how do you mobilize the team and use that energy for good and impact the communities where we live in? And the third part, I think it's now picking up. GCCs can sort of drive the organization's ESG agenda. And almost 50% have started on that journey through key competencies like project management, supplier risk management, analytics, and technology, etc. So they can actually help drive the ESG agenda forward.
Right. So Aparna, I think you've pretty much answered everything with regards to hiring, honing skills, retaining top talent, and of course the sustainability aspects in GCCs. One last question, going forward, how do you see the landscape of GCC evolving? I mean, everything is accelerating, so how does GCC look in a span of 5 years?
Let me talk about GCC's evolution first, and I think we've already started on that journey where the GCCs are probably the second headquarters or one of the largest organizations in the company, right? And 5 years from now, I think we will go further on the journey where we'll truly be a driving force for transformation, for customer-centric approaches, for DEI and other aspects, because this is a global organization that has people from different backgrounds, different cultures, different languages, and truly making work that is impacting the end consumer. I think the days have gone where GCCs are like my SLA and my KPI is so many invoices. It's no longer about that. That's a given. It's about what is the transformational work that you're doing that's impacting, say if it's a retail organization, the person who's queuing up to buy a product, or if it's a healthcare organization, the person that's a patient, for example. So truly impacting that last person in the mile, and innovative services, driving technology for the entire organization. I think that's where GCCs are going to be there, and HR will evolve to be true business partners, not executioners, which already I think the journey has started in making some of this happening from a strategic point of view.
Right then, that was Aparna Rao, and in this conversation what we've learned is GCCs are definitely in a good space, and more important, one pertinent point is AI is not going to make humans redundant, because at the end of it, it's skilling and upskilling that is going to make humans more pertinent to technology. Thank you very much for your time. Aparna, thank you very much for your time. It was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.